How's it going, welders on YouTube? Sorry I haven't posted a video in a minute. I've been cleaning my apartment, got people coming over. It's my birthday next week, but I had a request from one of my subscribers to check out some aerospace weld tests. So we're going to get into 4 aerospace weld tests and 1 fabrication weld test. So hopefully you learned something, and without further ado, let's get into it. So the first aerospace company on the list is Robinson Helicopters, and that's in Torrance, California. Now, before we get started, there's one thing you need to know about aerospace weld tests. There isn't just one test. You usually take a test to get into the company, and then you have to take another D17.1 test to stay in the company. So don't think because you got in, they're going to keep you. If you fail the D17.1 test, they may not necessarily fire you, but you might get demoted to, say being a fitter, or they'll put you somewhere else in the company. Or I've heard some cases they will just let you go. So this is the weld test for Robinson Helicopters. And their weld test is, I believe the first one is chromoly, and you have to do a T-joint and a butt joint. And if I remember right, that looks like it's about like 40 thousandths-ish. And the first one looks like it's chromoly. And we'll scroll across. And this one is the stainless steel. And then the last one is aluminum. Now, obviously, as you can see, they provide a fixture with an argon purge, so it makes life a whole lot easier for you. And I think I took this weld test when I just got out of welding school, maybe within a year or two, and it was relatively easy. I 100% got the job, but I ended up not getting hired for Robinson Helicopters due to a technicality. See, this company, they require you, they want to see the last 10 years of your tax returns for some particular reason. And I was already working at another aerospace company at the time, so I kind of didn't want to deal with the BS. And an HR person basically just told me to screw off, which that definitely happens a lot. Be careful. You could be the most skilled welder in the world, and if an HR person doesn't like you, you're gone. So this is Robinson Helicopters. Weld test number 2 is a company called Harco Semco, and this company specializes in thermocouples and really small items. And the way D17.1 welding tests go is you take a test on a diameter of material smaller than what you'll be working on. So this is really tiny. It looks like this is probably like 1/4 inch tubing. And this was the weld test to get into the company. And they provide you with a, I believe this was a aluminum and copper fixture. So there's no purge going through here. And I believe, if I remember right, one of these was Inconel and the other one was stainless steel. And once you're in the company, I think within the first 3 or 4 months, I didn't last that long. I quit I quit for, I'm not going to get into that. And actually, this location has been permanently shut down. It's in Valencia, California. And now this is one of the actual D17.1 tests. So again, really thin tubing to sheet metal plate. And I believe the plate was also around like 40 thousandths-ish. It's pretty thin. And they're also going to put it on a copper fixture, so there's no purge. So you got to be really careful with this one. Now, this is one of those examples where if you did have a purge, you definitely want to run it really low. I'm talking about like 1-2 CFH, because a small item like this, you'll get sucked back. And this was the D17.1 test to stay at Harco Semco, and you had to do Inconel 718, Inconel 625, stainless steel, and titanium, all like this. Okay, so next company is Senior Aerospace SSP. Now, the weld test to get into this company was actually a Inconel butt joint. And I found that test to be more difficult than this one here. And what they were looking for in that weld test was full penetration. I believe it was 40 thousandths, and the coupon was about 6 inches long, so you had to get full penetration um, throughout most of the middle of it. They wouldn't count like the first half inch and the last half inch. And then once you're in, it's mandatory. All people train for 1 month at this company, paid. And then this is the D17.1 test to stay in. You're going to take 2 of these tests. I only took them in Inconel because that's all I was working on, but they test people on Inconel, stainless, and aluminum. I'm not sure what the aluminum test would look like. I'm assuming it would be similar, but the stainless steel one is definitely exactly like this. So it's a tube to tube. The tubes are about a ½ inch in diameter. So, typically whenever you test on a diameter smaller than what you'll be working on. And then after you do the tube to tube, you will do tube to plate. And they'll switch up the material thicknesses, so you'll do 2 of these. And it seems like it's difficult, but it's actually relatively easy. And so there's a purge running inside the tube through the turntable. There is a second purge underneath on the bottom. So this purge inside the tube, you want to have tops 5 CFH when you're doing the tube to tube. When you're doing tube to plate, you want to have that at 2-3 CFH, so you don't get any suck back. That's more than enough purge for that. And then this bottom one, it varies. You want to crank it up, but to the point where it's not blowing the argon away from your torch. So 15, 20, you're just gonna have to gauge that with some scrap material, and as long as it's not blowing the argon out of your out of your torch, you're good to go. So this is the weld test at Senior Aerospace SSP, the D17.1 weld test. Okay, next company on the list is Megitt Aerospace. I totally forgot when I took this test, and to be quite honest with you, the only reason I took this test was to see the inside of the shop floor. I already had a job at the time. The reason I actually got the job at Megitt, even though I think this weld test looks horrible, and we'll get into why it looks horrible. I got the job, but it was too far of a commute from where I lived in California, so I turned it down. And this job, the whole test was stainless steel, so we got a T-joint, a couple of butt joints, and the reason it looks so bad is because we weren't allowed to actually use this fixture. And then as you can see too, with this tube to plate, this piece of plate was bent. So they kind of just threw some scrap metal your way and wanted you to test. But they were looking for consistency. Bead width, heat affected zone, not too much deviation. So they actually said that this test was good to go. Now, obviously I didn't accept the job here, so I'm not sure what their D17.1 test was, but I could show you one more thing. So Megitt Aerospace, they specialize in a variety of things, but one of the things they said I would have been working on top of a few other things, would have been their fire suppression systems. And that's this thing right here. And my friend actually works at Megitt Aerospace, and he showed me an image of how they set something like this up. It's actually partially automated. So there'll be a turntable on either side, and it'll rotate this ball, and the torch will actually move from side to side, creating this weave. So yeah, robots taking our jobs. I wish you got a better view, but this this torch setup is actually similar to a jet line, or I'm not sure if you guys see that, but you can look it up. A jet line, it's like an automated welder. This little portion right here feeds the rod, and you could adjust it up, down, left, right, and control the speed. And we got the torch right there. But yeah, that's Megitt Aerospace. Okay, so this weld test, I was actually able to keep this one because it kind of failed, but kind of didn't at the same time. But we still learn from it. So this weld test came from Honeywell Aerospace. Butt joint, about 6 inches long, and I'm zoomed in because this is actually a good example of what they expect of you for all aerospace weld tests. Now, who cares about what my beads look like? As long as I'm getting full penetration and there's no porosity, beads don't really matter. I mean, you know, of course, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, your visual inspection, but what they're looking for is consistency on the outside of your beads. So the bead width can vary. You know, your bead can be wide and it can shrink, but it cannot do it abruptly, and it can't do it too much. So, you know, say you have a bead that's, you know, just throwing a number out there, you know, say that it's like an inch wide, and that inch goes down to a half inch, that's going to fail. But if that inch goes down to, you know, 7/8, and then go, you know, and it fluctuates between 7/8 and an inch, you're good to go. So if you notice that, you know, yeah, my actually I didn't do half bad, it might be a little wider there, but I mean, as long as it looks fairly parallel, you're good to go. Now this is the front of the Honeywell Aerospace weld test. Oh, and this is Inconel, by the way, because that's all I was working on at this company. They also test people, depending on what department you're working in, on stainless steel or aluminum. So this is the front of the weld test. This is the back. I'll zoom in on those beads. And this is acceptable, but where it failed is right here. So this weld test failed because I didn't secure the jig properly and it fell out, and yeah, it wasn't perfectly flat. So they just made me take another test, and I took that test in, you know, 10-15 minutes, and I was good to go after that. Unfortunately, I didn't stay at this company too long either. This was just before I was moving to Las Vegas. So I basically worked at Honeywell just to see the inside of it. Great company. If you want to work at Honeywell, there's only one way to get in. You have to go through a recruiting agency called Manpower. And once you do, you're on probation for 1 year. At least that's how it was in Torrance. And then after that, you're a permanent employee. And basically, from my understanding, from what I heard from people that were there for a year, it's almost like a union. Like you're unfireable. But yeah, that's Honeywell Aerospace. So if you're subscribed to my channel, you've probably already seen this weld test. This one is from SpaceX, and I totally forgot where. I probably have to recheck my own video, but there's multiple departments in SpaceX, and each one gets different tests. I didn't stay there long enough to get the D17.1 test because this was just before I moved to Texas. So this was another company where I just wanted to take the test to step inside the door and see what was going on in this place. And if you remember all of the other weld tests, they were all similar. It was either tube to tube, plate to plate, and you know, they prepped you for D17.1. SpaceX, unfortunately, keeping it real, there's a fucking idiot in charge of this area, and this is the weld test this moron came up with. And you have to take this test at a 45-degree angle. It's stainless steel, and there is a lot of leeway, a lot of leeway, because you know, I think what they're making is disposable anyway, so it just has to be good enough. So nothing there is really getting x-rayed or anything like that. And as you can see from, you know, some of the guys that are in there welding, this is pretty hot. But I think that person actually got in. And if we look over here, you could tell, like, yeah, that one's looking like it's pretty toasted too. But I think that one also passed as well. So, you know, as much as people say, oh, SpaceX, the bar is actually pretty low at this company. And good thing is that they pay pretty well. Now, I've mentioned before that SpaceX took down one of my previous channels for posting their weld test on the internet. And here's the legal document that they sent to my house. And yeah, and then a couple of days later, my YouTube channel went down. This has happened to me actually twice. Senior Aerospace SSP also sent me a letter very, very similar to this. And yeah, they say, oh, proprietary information. And it's like, really? Well, especially with SpaceX. I was like, that weld test was so shitty, and it was made by some random ass welder, but it's a proprietary welding information. So just be careful. Sometimes some companies will fire you, or they'll seek legal action if you take photos of on their property and photos of their equipment. Okay, so the last weld test we're getting into is not from an aerospace company, but it's from a company here in Dallas called R&D Machine, or R&D Machine Shop. I hope that's what it is. And there's a really, really awesome welder working there. His name is Rodney Clark. If you ever find your way over to Dallas, this is a great shop to work in. Rodney is a pain in the ass, but he'll teach you. He'll show you everything. And one of the reasons I think this man is brilliant is because this is one of the more difficult weld tests I have ever seen in my career, and it was actually a lot of fun. And so let's start off over here. So square tubing. So this is a fabrication test, not a weld test. So the square tubing, he wanted to see, he wanted to see weaves. Now the reason he wanted to see weaves on the outside of this tubing was because typically this is going to get ground off by the finishing department. And it needs to be high enough so it looks nice and flush when you're done. And one of the problems with welders is that you know, they'll weld some square tubing like this, and they won't leave a high enough profile for the finishers. And then what'll happen is, you know, there'll be a hole or something like that. You know, I mean, it'll be totally structurally fine, but visually speaking, no. So you know, the tubing will come back to you. You'll fill in that hole, and it'll go back to finishing. So, you know, he makes sure that you can actually fill it to the proper level before setting it off. And then we have here in the middle, we got some thin stuff. This is just a corner joint, and I believe that was 45 thousandths. And then, since this is a fabrication test, he also gives you a cube. Now this is I think this is the third time I've had a cube weld test. He doesn't make you weld it, which that would have been a lot of fun. But if you do weld a cube, you also have to always remember, ask them to drill a hole in it, or, you know, or don't finish it, because you will get outgassing. But he wants to see how well you fit something up, and this will easily expose the skill or lack thereof of a welder. A lot of guys can't do this, and this test is actually given out by NASCAR. And I've seen horrible weld tests from guys that are in NASCAR, but they still get in for some particular reason. Maybe they've daddy or they know somebody in there. But yeah, cubes are a lot of fun, and they, you know, they really show your strengths and your weaknesses in terms of how good of a fabricator you are. And last but not least, we have round stuff. So you're supposed to fit this up at 90 degrees, so you actually can fit something up properly without it bowing too much to the left or the right. And things that are round are typically more difficult. And I believe this pipe, it's schedule 40, so it's pretty thick, so you can pump a lot of heat in there. But what he's looking for is a consistent bead, and he keeps the pipe, this is relatively small for this industry. It's about like, what, maybe 1.25 inch diameter, but it still requires you to move quite a bit. So yeah, it's a really good test. And then one more to see how competent you are with round items on this tube to plate. So this was the weld test at R&D Machine Shop in Dallas, Texas. Highly recommend working there. It's a pain in the ass. It definitely give you a ton of hours, but there's a good mentor there that you can learn a ton from. Okay, so that concludes the aerospace weld tests and the one fabrication weld test. A couple of things, I guess off the top of my head, when it comes to D17.1 welding and worrying about the X-ray. A lot of people freak out about D17.1 welds, you know, because they're, oh my God, it's gonna get X-rayed. You'd be surprised how forgiving an X-ray machine is. As long as you do not have porosity or a tungsten inclusion, you're pretty much good to go as long as you keep your weld consistent. And that's both sides, top and bottom. Now, one other thing that you can get away with a lot of the times, not with super thin material, because it'll be really obvious, but on thicker material like 60 thousandths, if you're welding along, and you know it's going to get x-rayed, say you dip your tungsten into the puddle, but the arc does not go out, you're good to go. There's no tungsten inclusion inside. Just keep going, and just keep a reminder of where it is, but keep in mind where it is. But yeah, just keep going and keep welding, and just make a circle of where you think it was, and tell the X-ray operator. Hopefully, there's nothing in there. But most of the time, I've never done it personally because I really stay careful with it. But I've known a lot of guys. Yeah, they totally dip it numerous times, and as long as your tungsten is still sharp at the end, or or it has some stainless or Inconel on it, but it hasn't broken off into the puddle, you're still good to go. So that concludes the aerospace weld tests and fabrication weld tests. Hey, hopefully you learned something. A lot of the time people are intimidated about weld tests, and you really shouldn't be. I mean, personally, I've taken 30 or 40 weld tests, like I've gotten over test anxiety. When I go to a company, I'm, all right, get me the hell out of here so I can hurry up and go get something to eat. Some tests just drag on, like this video. But hey, thanks for watching. Peace.